it is too warm to freak out. So that's why I'm sitting here the entire video. No, I'm just kidding. Hi everyone, welcome and welcome back to a new video. Today with the Midyear Freakout Book, whatever. Put the words in the right order, whatever you think makes the most sense. Tag thingy-majig. And I will not only give you the tag itself, we will definitely go through that, but I wanted to take the first couple of minutes to go through some stats because yay, spreadsheets. But I'll promise I'll keep it short. So in the first half of the year, I've read a total of 48 books, which is way more than I anticipated. 2 of those were DNFs, but that's okay. And I read a total of 17,407 pages. That includes the DNFs, but only the pages that I've actually read before I DNF'd it. That is a pretty good month, considering last year I read a total of 110 books, but page count was at around 33,000 if I remember correctly. So with 17,000 now, but 48 books, that is page-wise better than last year. To date, year to date. Of course. And then, while the year has been a roller coaster in a lot of senses, from a reading perspective, it was actually pretty phenomenal. So 48 books, 23 are 5-star reads, and 14 are 4-star reads. So the majority of my books received a really good rating. And I have to say, if I think through it and look through the list of books that I've read, there were a lot of good ones, but we get through to those during the tag situation. Most of them were fantasy. That's something where I'm a little bit sad. I would have loved to have read more sci-fi. Only 2 is a little bit low, but we have another half a year. So I just have to make sure that I'm reading more sci-fi in the second half of the year. And as I've, more pages this year, but less books, that points toward one of my goals going so far really well, which is reading bigger books. So last year, this chart was more leaning towards the 200 to 400 page book size. Now it is leaning more towards the 300 to 700 page book size. So I'm reading a lot bigger books, which I'm excited about. That's what I wanted anyway. On the author side, that's where I could have done a bit better too. While I have some authors from from all over the world, the majority is still from the US, and I like to actually broaden my view on those. So in the second half, I'll try to, include more books from other regions, from authors from anywhere else besides the US. It's not US only, it's North America, so Canada and US, but I mean, let's face it, most of them are from the US. The majority of books that I read are actually physical books. I only had 6 audiobooks, 2 from the library, 4 that I owned, but 3 of those I listened to the audiobook and read the book simultaneously. So not at the same time, I didn't do that, what is it called, where you do both at the same time, but I read parts of it, or I listened to parts of it, and then I read other parts of it. And then the one thing that just is ridiculous, so I started 12 new series and I only finished 4. And the middle number should be a lot higher as well. It should be much higher than the started one, because I started a bunch of series that have more than 3 books, like the Green Rider series, right, where we have 6 middle books. So only the first one is the first, and the last one that isn't out yet, that would be an end book, but everything in between, the 6 books in between, would fall into the middle category. So yeah, I'm not doing well with continuing series. And then just a quick breakdown into the months, January to June. January is definitely my worst month, and June was definitely my best month, and the rest was pretty much average to what I did last year. And the same also for pages that I read per month. Again, January, way low. For several reasons, I just didn't have as much time to read. And June, I had a lot more time to read because the last 2 weeks of June, I was on vacation, so I pretty much read a bunch of books. What else do you do on vacation when it's freaking hot outside? Lastly, something that I did more this year as well is reading self-pub books or indie published. I put both into those in the same category because sometimes I didn't know if it falls under indie was self-published, so I just put it both under the self-published category. Let's start with the tag, and the first question is the best book you've read this year, and I can never narrow it down to just one, so I have 2 for you. One is Ashley Aldrin's The Push. That was a recommendation by Jake from The Bookish Drummer, and I loved it. It was so amazing. It gave me, it had me go through all the emotions, including at the end, a feeling of just wanting to throw the book against the wall, and I don't throw books against the wall, like, it's not the book's fault, but it was so well written and it caught me off guard. Like, a lot of the things that happened just were so amazingly well done. It is devastating, don't get me wrong. It's a terrible story and there's a lot of stuff happening where we're just sitting there, it's like, I cannot believe that this is happening right now. But because I was so agitated at the end of the day, this has gotten like 6 out of 5 stars for me, and I loved the experience with this. The other one, which is technically a series, and I only have the first 2 books here, is the Last Gift series. In particular, book 2 is my favorite, Whispers of Stone. I've read the Gossamer Strings, or These Gossamer Strings already, which comes out on July 12th. This series is definitely a serious contender for Book of the Year. I binge read it. I loved it so much. I just had to continue. I couldn't put it down, and I loved it so much. So yeah, this one is definitely also a favorite. Question number 2 is for the best sequel. And again, as I've said already, I can't only pick one. And from a best sequel perspective, I have one, Lila Lawson's The Wolf Den, which is book 2 in the Dead Rockster series. Besides the fact that this is just a gorgeous cover, the story was a lot of fun too. This is more urban fantasy. It's set in the South being south of the US, like the South. And it was just such a blast to read. And again, I binge read both of the 2 books, and now I'm sitting here waiting for the 3rd book in the series. And I'm hoping it comes out at one point. But it was so much fun. It is just a ridiculous story, and the characters were well developed and super likable. Like, the main character, I really enjoyed like going along with her and discovering where she has her powers from and whatnot. It was just a lot of fun. And then the other one, which was kind of a surprise read, is The Icesar Falcon by K.S. Veloso. The first book being The Wolf of Oranjaro in the Chronicles of the Bleep Queen. Although I'm swearing on this channel, so I should probably not even bleep it out anymore. But that series, I also binged all 3 books, and I loved it. It was such a unique way of telling the story. It's all in first person from the view of our queen, and it was devastating. I really, really felt for her, and that whole women in leadership and the struggles they have to face and all the political intrigue in here was just so well done. But it was such a good series that I find is completely underrated. I mean, all of the ones that I've talked about are completely underrated on BookTube, and I wish more people would pick it up. I think Leslie read book 1 of the series and also really enjoyed it. Question 3, new releases you haven't read yet, but want to, and there are multiple. I mean, everything that came out. But the ones that I want to highlight is one, The Girl Who Outgrew the World by Zoe Stage, which was a birthday present, also from Jake from the book Strummer. And Zoe Stage is just a favorite author. Last year, I read all of her other books. And I loved them. Well, Getaway was kind of meh, but Wonderland and Baby Teeth was fantastic. Jake said this is not as good as Baby Teeth and Wonderland, but also a lot of fun, so I'm still excited about it, and it's a shorter one. And then I definitely want to read All the Horses of Iceland from Sarah Tolmie. I mentioned that already in my quarterly check-in. I haven't read it yet. I still want to, and I'm still thinking it's a quick one. I should be able to squeeze it in somehow. I haven't yet. But I've heard so many good things about this book that it is unexpectedly beautiful, and yeah, I love Iceland. I love Iceland horses, so I really hope to read this at one point. Then we have the most anticipated releases for the second half, and there are a ton. From a self-prep perspective, there's the second book in the Josephine series. I don't know how many books there are going to be in the series, but I read book 1 already last year. It was supposed to come out in June, but it got delayed to December. I think it says November or December right now. And this is also a fun, just urban fantasy set in Germany with a main character named Josephine, spelled the same way my name is spelled, not with a PH, but with an F. And how can I not love this series? I mean, seriously. The other one is Gunmetal Gods, book 3 of the Gunmetal Gods series, although I've seen a tweet somewhere where Zamil said that he's now planning it for early next year. So I'm a bit worried because I really want to know how this series ends, and I hope it is only a trilogy. I'm actually not sure. I don't even know if Zamil is sure. But I'm hoping that I'm going to get the third book in the Gunmetal God series this year. Originally he was saying by the end of the year, but yeah, as I said, I've seen him saying something on Twitter with maybe early next year, so we'll see. And then one book that Sarah from Fairy Reads recommended, it's A Taste of Golden Iron, and I ordered the special edition from the Broken Binding. Of course, even though I know nothing about the book, I know Sarah is excited about it, and Sarah can tell me everything, and it's pretty much an auto-buy. Well, not all of the books, but there are certain books that I know if Sarah likes them, I will like them too. And then, of course, as you know, I love Stephen King. Well, not all of his books, but the ones, the style of the ones that I like. Like, there's a specific style that he writes, and those I enjoy. I don't read his horror books, like It and all that kind of stuff. I've never read, and I have no intention of ever reading it, but his more psychological horror, psychological thriller ones, all of those are amazing. And Fairy Tale coming out later this year, so I definitely want to read that one. And I think we are actually reading that on Jake's from the Bookish Drummers channel in September when it's coming out, if I'm not mistaken. Alrighty, now we're getting into the biggest disappointments, and all here as well. I'll give you two. One is R. Scott Baker's The Darkness That Comes Before. I know this is a very beloved fantasy series that gets a lot of praise, and I understand where it's coming from. It's big prose. That's what this book is, and I don't like a book just because an author is able to write in big prose, because I usually don't like big prose. And I think he has completely overdone it in here. The story, though, itself, I actually find really interesting, and I want to continue eventually, but it is kind of a chore to go through this book and read it, because he says so many things in so many unnecessarily windy ways. And I'm like, oh my goodness, just get to the point, please. But besides that, again, the story was very fascinating. The other disappointment was The Girl in the Tower and The Winter of the Witch, book 2 and 3 in the Winter Night Chronicles, I think is what the series is called. I loved book 1. I finished that in December. It was on my top list of books for 2021. I had so high expectations for book 2 and 3, and it completely let me down. Because it was a completely different atmosphere, it felt like a completely different story, and it felt more like a YA angsty romance of some sort. There was then even a weird sex scene in there that I just didn't, was completely unnecessary, was so out of character, and that was the point where it completely lost me, unfortunately. Biggest surprise, on the other hand, was Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, which is essentially his biography, and it was a big surprise for me because I was reading it. I talked about that before in one of my bi-weekly ramblings. I was reading it while I was on the way to the doctor, and I just needed something to distract me, and I picked the first audiobook that was on my, app thingy. And it was this one, and I just wanted something to talk to me while I was driving so I can focus on driving. And then I realized, hey, this is actually really good. I didn't expect it. I mean, I knew this was a bestseller for a reason, but yeah, I was really surprised. I loved the way he told the story, because there are a lot of controversial, triggering topics in here, and I thought the way he approached it with just being, this is just the way it was, right? Like, he's not apologizing for those things. He's just explaining hey, this is how I grew up. And I really loved the way he did that. Question number 7 is favorite new author. So from my favorite new book, I think you can guess that Allegra Pescatori is definitely high on my list. And oh my god, she has some other books out. Thankfully, she has some other books already out. I think two more, the whole series. I read that already, but then 2 more first books in 2 different series and 1 novella in one of the series. So I have to read those as well. So she definitely is high on my list. And then the other new favorite author is O.R. Lear, who wrote one of the 2 sci-fi books that I read this year. He only wrote 1 book so far, at least as far as I know. And I think book 2 is coming out in November, if I'm not entirely mistaken. But I loved the way he told this story here, and I really enjoyed this ride. I loved the way he told the story, the way he built the characters and the world this is set in. And I thought it was incredibly creative how he set up the whole alien topic here, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I have a way of comparing it. There's something I compare it to, but that is kind of half a spoiler for the story, so I'm not doing that. But he was amazing, and I really enjoyed the ride with this book. Newest fictional crush. Usually I don't do fictional crushes, but I have to say, I'm sorry, how often can I put bring up this book in one video. It's not the Green Riders this time. Do you see that? This definitely, from a count of mentioning this book, is higher up than Green Riders usually, so that tells you something. But there's one character in this book called Damon Indigo that I just, yeah, he is awesome. I love him. I mean, fictional crush, love him. And then newest favorite character, so not crush, but just generally favorite character, I guess, would be Stormy Spooner, which is the main character in the Dead Rockster series. The main character in this book, she was just a lot of fun. I related to her on quite a bit of levels, but she was just a really fun, quirky character with a bunch of flaws that she used to her advantage, and it was just a lot of fun following her around. So she was definitely, or she is, a new favorite character. And then a book that made you cry. And here I have to bring up The Green Rider because Mirror Side always makes me cry. It has been my third or fourth reread of the series. I'm not quite sure. And I knew what was coming. I knew it. But every time it's just... And I'm not much of a crier when it comes to movies or books. I mean, I get sad and I feel for the character, but I usually don't flat out cry. And this one... every single time. Tears. And then which book made you happy? Well, Green Rider also makes me very happy. But for this one, I'm actually picking Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood, which was a shorter novella love story thing. It was just a lot of fun. I really like the enemy to lovers trope when it comes to romance, and I am a fan of Ellie Hazelwood's writing. I really enjoy the way she introduces the characters and just the characters she comes up with. They're just a lot of fun. Question 12. The most beautiful book that I received as a gift or bought for myself. Besides the signed first edition of Prelude to Foundation that I found, it's not a beautiful book. I mean, the book itself is pretty boring, but I mean, first edition signed by Isaac Asimov. Hello. But besides that, Lightblade, hands down, has my favorite cover of the year. I'm loving the blue-orange combination of the cover. There's a dragon on the cover. What else can you want? So this, I mean, besides it being an amazing read, I just love this cover, and, you know, I love to have this on my shelf. Last question, question number 13. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? And, well, if you remember the stats from earlier with I started way too many series, everything that I started, that's what I have to read for the rest of the year. There are just so many series that I want to finish, and they were all good, and I don't know why I'm not continuing those. I will, I promise. But in the meantime, I'll start a couple more series, just because. What would your answers have been for those tags? If you've made a video for that tag already, put it down in the comments so others can see them too, because this is the type of video I love watching, and I've watched so many of those already, but there's still so many in my watch later list. So just put your video down in the comments if you have done one, or if you haven't done one and don't want to do one, you can also put just the answers to the questions down in the comments as well. I'm super curious what everybody's favorite book was, or biggest disappointment, or new favorite author, and like all of those things. I always love to hear that stuff. And then thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!